Hi everyone, it's Aaron here from Push Square, and if you like Batman, then you better swear to me. Because this weekend saw a boatload of new details drop for both Rocksteady's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, as well as WB Montreal's Gotham Knights, both of which I'll be happily discussing and reacting to in today's video. It was of course all a result of Saturday's digital DC Fandome event, which I would highly recommend catching the highlights of because, oh my god, that new trailer for Matt Reeves' The Batman looks so good. Anyways, enough of that, let's get on to the games. So let's start the video discussing the big one, arguably, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. So we got a new story trailer for this game. It's obviously the first game from Rocksteady on next-gen platforms since it released Arkham Knight way back in 2015. And honestly, I always find myself in disbelief that it has in fact been that long since we received a full-fledged Batman game. So yes, by the time this game releases, it would have been a staggering 7 years since we played Arkham Knight, but luckily, from what we saw from the new story trailer at DC Fandome, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is shaping up to be a riot of a game, I think is the best way I'd put it. So yes, this is PlayStation 5 only, no PlayStation 4 release unfortunately, but hopefully you can tell that with this new in-engine footage, it will be taking full advantage of the next-gen tech. So what did I think of this new story trailer for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League? Well, overall, I got some really good impressions. Better ones than I had with the first trailer we received last year because we got to see some in-engine footage. It might have not been strictly gameplay, but we got a better idea of how the game will look as well as the overall vibe of the game. Obviously last year, the only thing we were lucky enough to receive was a CGI trailer that served as a first introduction to the 4 characters we will eventually be able to play as. But this year, the trailer we received gave us a much better, much clearer idea of the type of game we can expect. So yep, this was very much a tone piece, all set to the backdrop of the Hive's Tick Tick Boom, which I think we can all agree is very much in keeping with the overall mood and atmosphere that you'd expect from a Suicide Squad game. Unfortunately, we're still none the wiser as to how the game will actually play when you actually get your hands on it and that controller, that lovely DualSense controller is in your hands. But for the time being, I do think I came away much more positively than I did from last year's trailer. A lot of this was down to the fact that we got a much better idea of the story, so we obviously know, clues in the title, that the Suicide Squad or Task Force X are being sent into the heart of a ruined metropolis to try and take down the likes of Wonder Woman, Superman, Flash and Green Lantern, all of which we got a better glimpse at in this trailer, and all of which it's been strongly hinted at have been brainwashed somewhat by Brainiac. I'm not too familiar with the character of Brainiac from the comics. I've mainly read, the classic stuff in terms of Batman. So I'm just from a pure player perspective, I'm quite eager to see how Task Force X are even going to approach taking down such godlike beings. It's been heavily implied that all 4 characters are going to have their own different playstyles. Obviously you got Captain Boomerang in there, so he's a heavily ranged character similar to Deadshot. King Shark you've obviously got there as the heavy, and then I have to assume that Harley is going to be the up close and personal melee based character. Obviously this is a 4-player cooperative game, but although it can be played single player, but the implication is that the characters, you're always working as a squad, they'll always be around you, so there should be some very interesting dynamics indeed. The one thing from a story point that still manages to baffle my mind is that WB and Rocksteady have both confirmed that this is the official continuation of the Arkham trilogy, though the tone and vibe, as I've already alluded to, are completely different. Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and of course Arkham Knight were very gritty, atmospheric games, very in keeping with the classic Caped Crusaders detective-style adventures, and this looks like that Rocksteady are having a lot more fun, which I'm sure is going to be an absolute blast to play, and should make for a rather fun story, albeit a dramatic one, but it does leave me wondering just how neatly this will tie in and slot into the story that Rocksteady have already established over the course of, over a decade now. It does make the mind wander. But big new reveal in this trailer was the fact that Amanda Waller is being played by Deborah Wilson, which I was very happy to see. Big fan of hers from, of course, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, as well as her earlier work in both the Wolfenstein games. I think she's going to make for an amazing Amanda Waller here. She's very much always at the top of her level when it comes to lending a gravitas to those characters. And I'm struggling to think of a better voice actress that could potentially lend their talents to that role. So that was a very nice surprise indeed. Of course, we already got some looks at the Justice League members. Superman looking very displeased with some purpley electricity flying out of his eyes, as well as the Flash kind of goading you a bit. They're all evil, How are we going to take them down? I have no idea, but we're going to have fun doing it. I mentioned the dissonance between Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League and the Arkham games, because to me it seems fairly obvious that this game, when it originally entered development, was being heavily influenced by that 2016 Suicide Squad movie. Not only because Deadshot takes heavy cues from Will Smith, both in his design, under the mask and over the mask, as well as King Shark's appearance and of course Captain Boomerang. But having said that, all fears should be quite quelled because it looks like they've completely ditched that sort of neon lit sort of architecture from that movie, and it's very much carving its way forward to do its own thing. But like I said, Deadshot was a very different character from what we saw in Arkham Origins and Arkham City, I think. So calling this an official continuation of the Arkham trilogy definitely seems strange to me. But having said that, there's a lot to love. And the trailer did end on a very funny moment of the Suicide Squad. It seemed like they were on mission to try and track down the Penguin. They eventually tracked him down, and while he was quote-unquote evading capture, they were getting Amanda Waller to repeatedly shock him. And it was just very funny, to be honest, and a great way to set the tone and end your trailer. So as I said, overall, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, it still leaves us wanting more, which I guess is a good position to be in. The in-engine footage looks great with some very nice visuals and bold colours, which is a big, distance from where we left the Arkham trilogy. And yeah, colour me excited, but cautiously so. I'm definitely sure I'm going to play this, not least because it's PlayStation 5 only, which is always an exciting thing to be eager for. Structurally, I just want to know more about it, and yeah, as I mentioned, what makes this a game set in the Arkhamverse? Because for my money, Gotham Knights WB Montreal definitely seems more in line with what we as players of the Batman games seem to have expected. So yes, this was of course the second heavy hitter game that was featured in DC Fandome. WB Montreal, the makers of course, Batman Arkham Origins, a game for my money that doesn't get enough love. A prequel that is too often just shoved to the side and not considered canon, when in fact it is. So yeah, if you haven't played Arkham Origins, definitely play that, because it's a great caliber of game, and it looks like WB Montreal have poured those efforts onto Gotham Knights. For those unaware, this is the game that takes place in the wake of Batman's death. So you don't actually get to play as Batman in this game, rather the focus is on the Bat family, namely Red Hood, Batgirl, Robin and Nightwing, all of which we saw a small snippet of gameplay of during last year's DC Fandome event. Didn't get that this year, surprisingly. Instead, the focus was on story, similar to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and just like Rocksteady's game, Gotham Knights is scheduled to release in 2022. So it's going to be a jamboree of Batman games next year, whether you're playing on PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4. And the good news is that both look great, despite being cut from the same cloth. And I say that because both games seem to take a 4-player approach, but as evidenced in the gameplay footage we saw of Gotham Knights last year, the emphasis seems to be on a more RPG-like focus. So numbers will be shooting out of enemies, there's going to be multiple bosses that you can repeat in order to upgrade and boost your version of either Red Hood, Batgirl, Robin and Nightwing. But it does make me sad that this isn't considered the canonical next step for the Arkham series, because the trailer we received this year, the story one, was very moody, very atmospheric. It's the heroes trying to find their feet in the wake of Batman dying, and I wasn't sure if this was already public knowledge, but as well as Batman having bit the bullet, James Gordon seems to be dead as well. So obviously, traditionally in Batman fiction, he is hailed as the voice of law and order, the voice of reason, the angel to Batman's devil on the shoulder, as it were. And this story trailer made it very clear, he's being memorialized. There's a statue of him overshadowing the Gotham City streets, and when the Bat family can't even look to James Gordon, the question is, who do they look to? The fact is no one, because they are on their own. So we might not have received any more gameplay, but what the story trailer did heavily emphasize was just how much of an important role the Court of Owls will play in this game, which I know is a major selling point for fans of the comics, particularly those who read and are familiar with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's original New 52 run from roughly 10 years ago now, guys. I think it was 2011 that comic series initially got going, which is a scary fact. Even scarier seems to be how the court is being depicted in the game itself. So for those unaware, the Court of Owls, they are a secret society that have been controlling events from the shadows for a number of years. And yeah, they're being heavily depicted here. They've been given the seal of approval from both Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. And interestingly, it was made evidence in this story trailer that the Talon enemies look to be having multiple classes with different combat abilities, which I think is an amazing approach to take with the Talon character. So Talons, they act as the court's hand, literally, they do their bidding. So the court, they're very much a reserved enemy. They like to gather around their tables and debate how to, structure Gotham and how it will be represented and presented going forward. So whenever they need to get their hands dirty, they don't do it themselves. Instead, they hire, I think it's traditionally orphan characters. They kind of steal away kids from the Gotham orphanage and then they retrain them up as brainwashed Talons, essentially. And whereas in the comic series, there was like a main character called Talon, here, Talons, you'll be facing them left, right and centre. Ones with different shields, one with different methods of attack. And I think that is a great way to interpret the Court of Owls in video game form. And as well as the story trailer, DC Fandome did dive a little bit deeper into Gotham Knights by way of a behind the scenes look. And it was here that we got to see how Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder's original vision are being interpreted, and those more specific details about how the Talon enemies will be handled. As you can probably tell, my excitement for Gotham Knights is substantially higher than Suicide Squad at the moment, despite the difference between developer caliber here. And I think a lot of that is purely down to the fact that I get a better sense of what Gotham Knights is and what it wants to be. Suicide Squad, for as fun as it looks, and for as ambitious as it seems to be, pitting these underdog, villainous anti-heroes against the titans of the DC industry, Gotham Knights just seems to soak in more of that Batman vibe, and I think it's going to scratch that itch that people have been hungry for, going on 6-7 years now. If I did have a worry about Gotham Knights, it is the RPG-ness of it all. Obviously, as I already mentioned in last year's gameplay trailer, the implication is that you're going to be rerunning bosses and certain missions in the hopes of upgrading your version of the Bat family. And my hope is that WB Montreal have found a nice equilibrium between this sense of gameplay as well as the story, because if anything, this year's trailer did a great job at convincing me on the story and kind of the weight of it all in this world without Batman. So that just about does it in terms of my impressions on both Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League and Gotham Knights. But before I sign off this video fully, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Injustice games, because we're now on the precipice of that Injustice animated movie now releasing, and while it's not meant to be all that great, I think it's very impressive that a game made by NetherRealm, by Ed Boon and his team, the Mortal Kombat folks, have gone on to have such an influence now within the DC world. Obviously, Tom Taylor's Injustice Year 1, Year 2 and Year 3 comic book runs were immensely well received in adapting the core story from those games, and I just think it's really cool that a concept and story that first began life in a video game has gone on to have such an impact, in other mediums now. So that's all I will say, and it was also nice to see the man himself sat on the sofa promoting it all. Where is Injustice 3, Ed Boon? We want it now. It's next up. Show us. Or maybe even give us another Mortal Kombat versus the Justice League game, which we've been so desperately waiting for. But anyway guys, that just about does it for my thoughts on both Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League and Gotham Knights, both of which will be coming to PlayStation at some point next year. And like I said, we are just going to be inundated with great Batman content next year. I think 2022 is going to be the year of the Batman, quite literally. Obviously, you've got these two games releasing, as well as Matt Reeves' new movie, and who knows what else, DC still might have something else up its sleeve. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for everything else PlayStation related. Be sure to let me know what your thoughts were on both games discussed down in the comments section below. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.